Don't let them take advantage of your grief. Those were my husband's final words before his heart attack killed him in our garden 3 years ago. Now I was crouched in my own basement, like a criminal, banned from my living room while my son entertained strangers with my food in my house. That's when I found the note that proved Robert had died, trying to warn me that our own child was planning to destroy me. I was standing in my own basement, holding a plate of sandwiches I'd made for guests I wasn't allowed to meet, when I realized my son had turned me into a prisoner in the house my husband and I built with our own hands 43 years ago. The laughter from upstairs felt like knives cutting through the floorboards above my head. My son Marcus was entertaining his colleagues and friends in what used to be my living room, in the house where I raised him, where I nursed him through chickenpox, where I celebrated every birthday and milestone of his life. And here I was, 72 years old, hiding in the basement like some shameful family secret. I could hear my daughter-in-law Cassie's voice carrying down through the heating vents, telling someone about the beautiful crown molding in the dining room. The same crown molding my husband Robert installed himself, working evenings and weekends because we couldn't afford to hire professionals. She was describing it like she'd chosen it herself, like this house was her creation, her achievement. My hands were trembling as I held that plate of turkey sandwiches, cut into perfect triangles the way I'd been making them for family gatherings for decades. But I wasn't family anymore. I was the help. I was the inconvenience tucked away downstairs, so the real adults could have their important conversations about careers and investments and vacation plans. 20 minutes earlier, I had climbed those stairs with a smile on my face, excited to meet Marcus's work friends, ready to share stories about my son's childhood, and maybe show off some old photo albums. Instead, I was intercepted at the top of the stairs like an unwelcome intruder in my own home. "Mom, I need you to stay downstairs tonight," Marcus had said, not meeting my eyes. "These are important clients, and we need to make the right impression." The words hit me like a physical blow. Important clients, right impression, as if I, the woman who worked double shifts as a nurse to pay for his college education, as if I would somehow embarrass him, as if my presence in my own living room would be a liability to his precious career. Standing there in my basement, listening to strangers eat my food and admire my home while I remained hidden below like some kind of family ghost, I felt something crack inside my chest. It wasn't my heart breaking. It was something deeper. It was my dignity finally demanding to be heard. To understand how I ended up banished to my own basement, I need to take you back 3 years to the worst day of my life. My husband Robert collapsed in our garden on a Tuesday morning in April while planting tomatoes. One moment, he was laughing about something our grandson Tyler had said. The next, he was gone. 45 years of marriage ended with a massive heart attack that took him before the ambulance even arrived. Robert and I had built everything together. We bought this house in 1981 when Marcus was just 2 years old, back when it was a small ranch that needed everything. We spent decades transforming it into our dream home. Robert handled the construction while I worked as a registered nurse at County General, often pulling double shifts to make ends meet. Every room held memories of our sweat and sacrifice. The kitchen, where we'd argued about cabinet colors. The master bedroom, where we'd added a bay window so I could read in the morning light. The basement workshop, where Robert taught Marcus to use power tools. When Robert died, I thought I might actually die from loneliness. The house felt impossibly big and quiet. I'd catch myself setting 2 places at the dinner table or calling upstairs to tell him something funny I'd seen on the news. Marcus seemed genuinely worried about me during those first few months. He'd call every day, sometimes twice, asking if I was eating enough, if I was sleeping okay, if I needed anything from the store. That's when he suggested moving in temporarily. "Just until you get back on your feet, Mom," he said. "Cassie and I hate the idea of you rattling around in that big house, all alone." It seemed like such a blessing. I'd have my son nearby, and I'd finally get to spend real time with my grandchildren, Tyler and Emma, who were 13 and 11 then. At first, it was wonderful. The house felt alive again with teenage laughter and family dinners. Cassie seemed helpful, offering to handle grocery shopping and household errands. Marcus would sit with me in the evenings, and we'd watch the same old movies that used to annoy him as a teenager. I thought I was getting my family back when I needed them most. But somewhere along the way, temporary became permanent. The helpful suggestions became demands. Cassie started rearranging furniture to update the space, always asking after she'd already moved things. Marcus began handling more of the household decisions, saying he wanted to take some pressure off me. When I protested that I was perfectly capable of managing my own affairs, they'd exchange those looks that said they thought I was being difficult. The changes happened so gradually that I didn't notice until it was too late. They changed the Wi-Fi password without telling me, started having friends over without asking, began referring to our house and our mortgage when talking to neighbors. Slowly, methodically, they erased me from my own life, while convincing themselves they were taking care of me. I'd become a guest in my own home, and not even a welcome one. The breaking point came on a crisp October evening that should have been a celebration. Marcus had just received a promotion to regional sales manager at his company, and Cassie decided to throw what she called a sophisticated dinner party to mark the occasion. I first learned about it when I heard the doorbell ringing repeatedly and saw catering trucks pulling into my driveway. I was coming up from the basement laundry room, carrying a basket of clean towels, when I nearly collided with a woman in chef's whites, carrying trays of appetizers into my kitchen. My kitchen, the kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, where Robert and I had shared our morning coffee for decades, where I'd taught Marcus to scramble eggs when he was 8 years old. "Excuse me," I said to the caterer, confused. "I think there might be some mistake." Before she could answer, Cassie appeared, wearing a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, and jewelry that must have cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her smile was bright and fake as she took my arm with practiced firmness. "Eleanor, darling, there you are. We're having a little celebration tonight for Marcus's promotion. Nothing too fancy, just some colleagues and a few important clients." She guided me toward the basement stairs, like I was a child who'd wandered into the wrong room. "I've made you a lovely plate downstairs. You'll be much more comfortable in your own space." My own space, as if the basement was where I belonged, as if the house I'd lived in for 42 years was somehow divided into territories, and I'd been assigned the underground portion. "Cassie, this is my house too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'd like to meet Marcus's colleagues." That's when Marcus appeared, looking handsome in his new suit, but wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating. He stepped between me and the main floor, like a bouncer at an exclusive club. "Mom, I need you to stay downstairs tonight," he said, not meeting my eyes. "These are important clients, and we need to make the right impression. You understand, don't you?" The words hit me like ice water. Important clients, right impression. As if my presence would somehow damage his career prospects. As if the woman who'd raised him, who'd sacrificed her own dreams to pay for his education, who'd worked double shifts to afford his baseball equipment and summer camps, was now an embarrassment to be hidden away. "I don't understand," I said, and I genuinely didn't. "This is my home, Marcus. These people are guests in my house." Cassie's laugh was like breaking glass. "Oh, Eleanor, honey, you know how you get confused around new people. Remember last month when you told that story about Marcus's childhood accident 3 times to the same neighbor? We don't want any awkward moments tonight." She patted my arm condescendingly. "I've made you a nice plate with all your favorites. You can watch your shows downstairs and have a peaceful evening." The doorbell rang again, and I could hear voices in the foyer. My foyer. People were walking into my house, hanging their coats in my closet, preparing to eat dinner at my table, and I was being banished to the basement like some kind of family shame. But the real betrayal came 20 minutes later, when I was sitting on my basement steps, still holding that basket of clean towels like a shield against my own humiliation. The heating vents carried every word from the dining room above, and I heard Cassie's voice, clear as day, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. "Oh, this house. Thank you so much. Marcus and I just love it here. We're so lucky to have found this place." A pause, then laughter. "Oh, that's just Marcus's elderly mother. She lives in the basement apartment we converted for her. We're so blessed to be able to take care of her. It's not easy, but family is family, you know." Sitting there in the dark, listening to my daughter-in-law erase me from my own life story, I felt something die inside me. It wasn't just disrespect. It wasn't just rudeness. It was complete erasure. In one conversation, she'd transformed me from the homeowner into the charity case, from the matriarch into the burden, from Eleanor Hartwell into Marcus's elderly mother, who lived in the basement like some kind of family pet they were too kind to abandon. That's when I understood that this wasn't temporary. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was my new reality, unless I did something to change it. I don't remember walking to my bedroom that night. One moment, I was sitting on those basement stairs, clutching that laundry basket like it was the only real thing left in my world. And the next, I was sitting on the edge of my bed at 2 a.m, still wearing the same clothes, listening to the sounds of the party finally winding down above me. The laughter had stopped hours ago, replaced by the clinking of dishes being cleared and the murmur of goodbyes at the front door. My front door. But I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, invisible and powerless and forgotten. I pulled out the photo albums I kept in my nightstand drawer, the ones I'd wanted to show Marcus's colleagues before I was exiled to the basement. There was Robert and me on our wedding day, standing outside the little church, where we'd promised to love each other through everything life could throw at us. There was Marcus at 5 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on Robert's shoulders in front of our old house before we'd added the second story. There was our first Christmas in this house, Marcus unwrapping presents under a scraggly tree, while Robert and I beamed in the background, so proud of what we were building together. When had I become the enemy in my own story? When had the little boy who used to run to me with every scraped knee and hurt feeling grown into a man who was ashamed of my existence? I traced my finger over a photo of Marcus's high school graduation, remembering how I'd worked 16-hour shifts for months to afford his cap and gown, his class ring, the little party we'd thrown in this very living room. The house had gone quiet above me, but I couldn't sleep. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden where Robert had died, where his tomato plants still struggled to grow without his careful tending. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered to him in the darkness, I let them make me disappear, Bobby. I let them turn me into everything I taught Marcus never to become. Do you remember what we used to tell him? That respect isn't something you get for free. It's something you earn and something you demand. But somewhere along the way, I stopped demanding it for myself. The worst part wasn't even the humiliation. It was the realization that I'd been complicit in my own erasure. Every time I'd swallowed my pride when Cassie rearranged my furniture. Every time I'd stayed quiet when Marcus made decisions about my house without asking me. Every time I'd accepted their explanations about what was best for me. I'd been teaching them that I didn't matter. I'd spent 3 years trying to be the perfect mother, the grateful recipient of their care, the uncomplaining burden who never caused problems. I'd been so afraid of losing them that I'd lost myself instead. I'd traded my dignity for their presence, and they'd accepted the bargain eagerly. But sitting there in the dark, surrounded by the ghosts of my real life, I remembered who I used to be. I remembered the woman who'd worked 2 jobs to support her family, who'd fought insurance companies and hospital administrators, who'd never backed away from a challenge. That woman wouldn't have hidden in the basement. That woman would have demanded better. It was time to find her again. The next morning, while Marcus and Cassie slept off their celebration and the grandchildren got ready for school, I did something I hadn't done since Robert's funeral. I opened our bedroom safe. Robert had installed it himself behind a family photo on our bedroom wall, joking that if anyone ever broke in, they'd never think to look behind a picture of his boring old wife. The combination was our wedding anniversary, June 15th, 1978, and my fingers trembled as I turned the dial for the first time in 3 years. Inside were documents I'd been too grief-stricken to examine properly when Mr. Cross, our family lawyer, had given them to me after Robert's death. At the time, I just wanted to make the legal nightmare go away so I could focus on missing my husband. Now, with clear eyes and a desperate need for answers, I spread everything across my bed like a detective working a case. The house deed was the first revelation. There it was, in black and white legal language that left no room for interpretation. Joint tenants with right of survivorship between Robert James Hartwell and Eleanor Marie Hartwell. When Robert died, his share automatically transferred to me. I was the sole owner of this house. Marcus had no legal claim whatsoever, not even as an heir, because there was nothing to inherit. The house was mine, completely and entirely. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. Underneath the deed was a letter from Mr. Cross, dated just 2 weeks after Robert's funeral, with a handwritten note clipped to it that made my blood run cold. Eleanor, Robert's familiar handwriting. If you're reading this, something has happened to me. Ben Cross has instructions about Marcus. Don't let grief make you do anything stupid. Remember what we always said. Respect is earned, not given. Even from family. Especially from family. I love you. Make them earn it. R. The attached letter from Mr. Cross was 3 pages long and devastating in its clarity. Robert had visited him 6 months before his death, expressing concerns about Marcus's financial irresponsibility and what he called Cassie's sense of entitlement. Robert had specifically instructed Mr. Cross to warn me against adding Marcus to any property deeds or financial accounts without independent legal counsel. Your husband was very concerned about protecting your interests, the letter read. He mentioned that Marcus had asked several times about inheritance planning and had suggested you might want to simplify things by adding his name to various accounts. Robert felt strongly that such arrangements would put you in a vulnerable position. I sat back on my heels, stunned. Robert had seen this coming. He'd known that Marcus might try to take advantage of my grief, and he'd tried to protect me, even from beyond the grave. But I'd been too lost in my sorrow to pay attention to his warnings. The financial documents told an even more infuriating story. I pulled out bank statements, insurance papers, and utility bills, laying them out in chronological order. For 3 years, I had been paying every single household expense. The mortgage payments that were almost finished, the property taxes, the utilities, the insurance, the maintenance and repairs. Marcus and Cassie had been living completely rent-free while contributing absolutely nothing to the household expenses. But they hadn't just been freeloading. According to the credit card statements I found, they'd been saving their money for vacations, new cars, and what looked like a substantial down payment fund. They'd been treating my home like a free hotel while building their own financial future. The most damning evidence was a folder I'd never seen before, filled with papers that must have fallen out of Marcus's briefing case. Real estate listings for houses in better neighborhoods, a pre-approval letter from a mortgage company, and most shocking of all, a handwritten note in Cassie's writing that said, "Once we get the house transferred, we can borrow against the equity for the new place. She'll never need to know." They weren't just taking advantage of my grief and loneliness. They were planning to steal my house entirely. Sitting there surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, I felt something shift inside me. The helpless widow was gone. The woman Robert had fallen in love with, the one who'd fought for everything she'd ever earned, was waking up, and she was furious. I waited until Marcus and Cassie left for work before I made my first call. My hands were steady now, my voice clear and determined, when Mr. Benjamin Cross answered his phone. "Mr. Cross, this is Eleanor Hartwell. I need to see you today. It's urgent." I told Marcus I had a doctor's appointment, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was finally going to get the cure for what had been ailing me for 3 years. My complete loss of self-respect. Mr. Cross's office felt like a sanctuary. Behind his mahogany desk, surrounded by law books and certificates, he listened without interruption as I laid out everything. The basement banishment, the party humiliation, the evidence I'd found in their papers. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. Your husband specifically asked me to watch out for this exact scenario. I should have been more proactive in checking on you." He pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "The good news is that legally, you hold all the cards. This is your house, period. They have no lease agreement, no ownership stake, no legal right to be there at all. You can evict them with 30 days' notice, or immediately, if you can prove they've been damaging your interests." What about grandparents' rights? What if they try to keep me from seeing Tyler and Emma? Mr. Cross's expression hardened. "Grandparents' rights don't give anyone the right to steal your home, Eleanor. And frankly, what they've been doing borders on elder abuse. If they want to play legal hardball, we have plenty of ammunition." I left his office with eviction papers prepared, but not filed, and a clear understanding of my options. My next stop was harder. I'd found Sarah Chen's real estate agency online, and I needed to know exactly what my house was worth in the current market. Sarah was a tiny woman with sharp eyes who didn't waste time on small talk. She walked through my house like a general surveying a battlefield, taking notes and measurements while I followed behind, seeing my home through a stranger's eyes for the first time in decades. "Mrs. Hartwell, I have to tell you, this is a beautiful property. The craftsmanship in the woodwork, the way you've maintained everything. This house would sell quickly. She quoted a number that made me sit down hard on my kitchen stool. $425,000. Robert and I had paid $38,000 for this house in 1981. All those years of work, all those improvements, all that love poured into every room had created something valuable, something that was mine alone. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to fight for my house. I was going to sell it and start over completely. If Marcus and Cassie wanted to play games about who belonged where, I'd remove the game board entirely. For 2 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, when Marcus and Cassie were at work and the grandchildren were at school, I transformed into a woman on a mission. I scheduled showings with Sarah Chen, timing them perfectly to avoid any chance of discovery. I researched senior living communities, visited 3 different facilities, and fell in love with Sunset Manor, a beautiful place with independent living apartments, a community garden, and residents who treated each other with respect. In the evenings, I played the role of cooperative Eleanor, the agreeable mother who stayed in her lane and caused no trouble. I made dinners I wasn't invited to share, did laundry for people who treated me like hired help, and smiled when Cassie complained about how hard it was to manage everything in my house. The lies came easier than I expected. When Marcus asked about my frequent outings, I told him I was attending grief counseling sessions. When Cassie wondered why I seemed different, I said the counseling was helping me accept my new role in the family. The irony was delicious. I was accepting my role, just not the one they'd assigned me. My house sold in 6 days. The buyers were a young couple with twin toddlers who walked through my home with the same wonder Robert and I had felt 43 years ago. They saw potential where we'd found fulfillment, future where we'd built memories. When they offered full asking price with a 30-day closing, I accepted immediately. The hardest part was packing Robert's things. Our bedroom had become a shrine to our marriage, and dismantling it felt like losing him all over again. But as I wrapped his old cologne bottle in tissue paper and packed away his favorite books, I could almost hear him cheering me on. "That's my girl," he would have said. "Show them what you're made of." I donated most of the furniture to charity, keeping only the pieces that held deep meaning. Robert's recliner, our wedding china, the photo albums that told our real story. A moving company would handle everything while Marcus and Cassie were at work. They'd come home to an empty house and a new reality. The night before closing, I cooked one last family dinner. Pot roast with all the fixings, the same meal I'd made for special occasions throughout Marcus's childhood. We sat around my dining room table, their dining room table, as they'd come to think of it, and I watched my son and daughter-in-law discuss their weekend plans, their work projects, their futures, all without once asking about mine. After dessert, after Tyler and Emma had gone upstairs to do homework, after Cassie had retreated to the living room to scroll through her phone, I looked across the table at Marcus, my son, my only child, the little boy I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through fevers, taught to ride a bike, cheered for at every baseball game and school play. "Marcus," I said quietly, "I have something to tell you." He looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised, with mild interest. "What's up, Mom?" I folded my hands in my lap and spoke the words that would change everything. "I've sold the house. The new owners take possession tomorrow morning, and I'm moving to Sunset Manor Senior Community this weekend." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Marcus's face went through a series of expressions I'd never seen before. Confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked almost like panic. His phone clattered to the table as he leaned forward, his voice rising to a pitch I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. "What do you mean you sold the house? You can't sell our house." The words hit exactly as I'd expected them to. Our house, not my house, not the house his father and I had built. Our house, as if he'd contributed anything more than attitude and entitlement for the past 3 years. "It's my house, Marcus," I said calmly, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "It has always been my house. Your father and I owned it together, and when he died, it became mine alone." Cassie appeared in the doorway like a shark sensing blood in the water. "What's going on? Why is everyone shouting?" "Mom's having some kind of episode," Marcus said, running his hands through his hair. "She thinks she sold the house." "I didn't think anything," I replied, reaching into my purse for the folder I'd prepared. "I did sell the house. Here's the sales contract, signed and notarized. Here's the deed showing my sole ownership. And here's the closing statement showing the sale will be final tomorrow morning." I spread the documents across the dinner table like playing cards, watching their faces as the reality sank in. Cassie grabbed the sales contract with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the legal language with growing horror. "This is impossible," she whispered. "You can't just sell a house without telling the people who live there. There are laws against this. We have rights." I almost laughed. "Rights? What rights exactly, Cassie? You're not on the deed. You don't pay rent. You don't even contribute to the household expenses. You have exactly 0 legal rights to my property." Marcus was on his feet now, pacing behind his chair like a caged animal. "Mom, you can't do this. Think about Tyler and Emma. Think about their schools, their friends. You're destroying their stability." "I'm thinking about my stability," I said, surprised by how good it felt to put myself first for once. "For 3 years, I've been treated like an unwelcome guest in my own home. Last week, you banished me to the basement so I wouldn't embarrass you in front of your colleagues. In my own house, Marcus. You made me hide in my own house." "That was just for one night," Marcus protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "One night that showed me exactly where I stand in this family." I pulled out another document. "Here's a printout of every household expense for the past 3 years. Mortgage payments, property taxes, utilities, insurance, maintenance. Guess who paid for all of it?" Cassie's face had gone pale. "We contribute in other ways. We help with maintenance, with grocery shopping, with—" "You rearrange my furniture and spend my money," I interrupted. "That's not contributing. That's redecorating someone else's life to suit your preferences." The real explosion came when I pulled out the final piece of evidence, Cassie's handwritten note about transferring the house and borrowing against the equity. Marcus stared at it like it was written in a foreign language. "Cassie, what is this?" "It's nothing," she said quickly, but her voice cracked. "It was just an idea. We weren't actually going to." "You were planning to steal my house," I said simply. "Not just live in it rent-free. Not just treat me like an inconvenience, but actually steal it, transfer ownership to yourselves, and borrow money against equity you didn't earn." Marcus looked at his wife with an expression I'd never seen before. Betrayal mixed with dawning comprehension. "Cassie, please tell me. This isn't what it looks like." "We deserved it," Cassie exploded, her composure finally cracking completely. "After everything we've done for her, all the sacrifices we've made, living in this outdated house instead of getting our own place. We deserve some security for our future." "You deserved nothing," I said, standing up from the table with more dignity than I'd felt in years. You earned nothing. You contributed nothing. And now you have exactly what you've earned. Nothing. I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up my purse, leaving them sitting there with the wreckage of their assumptions scattered across my dining room table. You have until tomorrow afternoon to pack your belongings and find somewhere else to live. The new owners take possession at noon. 8 months later, I'm sitting in my favorite spot in the Sunset Manor Community Garden, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold that Robert would have loved. My small apartment behind me is filled with light, laughter from my new friends, and the kind of peace I'd forgotten existed. The adjustment wasn't immediate. Those first few weeks, I'd wake up expecting to hear Marcus's alarm clock or Cassie's morning routine. Instead, I heard birds singing outside my window and the gentle conversation of neighbors who actually wanted my company. Mrs. Patterson from down the hall brings me fresh biscuits every Tuesday. Mr. Rodriguez and I play chess on Thursday afternoons. Nobody treats me like a burden or an embarrassment. I'm Eleanor again, not just Marcus's elderly mother. I used part of the money from the house sale to establish education trust funds for Tyler and Emma. They'll be able to attend any college they choose, regardless of what their parents can afford. I sent the paperwork to them directly, along with letters explaining that my love for them never changed, even when I had to change my life. Emma wrote back 3 weeks later. Her letter, written in careful cursive on lavender stationery, brought me to tears. Grandma Eleanor, she wrote, I understand why you had to leave. Mom and Dad were being mean to you, and nobody should be treated like that, especially not someone as wonderful as you. I miss you, but I'm proud of you for being brave. Marcus and Cassie found a rental house across town. The initial fury faded into cold silence, punctuated by occasional attempts at reconciliation that felt more like negotiations than apologies. I've learned to recognize manipulation disguised as family concern, and I no longer feel obligated to accept it. I volunteer at the Children's Hospital now, reading stories to young patients whose parents work long hours. It reminds me why I became a nurse all those years ago. Not for the thanks or recognition, but for the simple satisfaction of making someone's difficult day a little brighter. Sometimes I talk to Robert while I tend the tomatoes I planted in the community garden. I tell him about my new friends, the book club I joined, the watercolor class I'm taking. Most importantly, I tell him that I finally learned the lesson he tried to teach me in that letter. Respect isn't something you give away for free, especially to people who mistake kindness for weakness. I'm 73 years old, and for the first time in years, I'm exactly where I belong, in a life I chose, surrounded by people who value me, living with the dignity I should never have surrendered. The house is gone, but I'm finally home.